परीक्षा पे चर्चा प्रतियोगिता 2026 में आपका स्वागत है। शिक्षा मंत्रालय भारत सरकार का यह विविध सहभागिता कार्यक्रम एक अभियान के रूप में प्रधानमंत्री नरेंद्र मोदी जी के प्रयासों से सतत बढ़ रहा है। उद्देश्य है छात्रों, अभिभावकों, शिक्षकों और पूरे समाज को एक साथ लाना। प्रधानमंत्री जी की पुस्तक एग्जाम वॉरियर्स शिक्षार्थियों को सकारात्मकता व आत्मविश्वास के साथ परीक्षाओं में सम्मिलित होने की प्रेरणा देती है। NIOS इसी प्रेरणा को साकार करते हुए शिक्षार्थियों में चरित्र निर्माण और व्यक्तित्व के सर्वांगीण विकास के साथ साथ कौशल व उद्यमिता को केंद्र में रख आगे बढ़ रहा है। परीक्षा पे चर्चा PPC 2026 शिक्षार्थियों को खुशी से सीखने और तनाव मुक्त परीक्षाओं की तैयारी के लिए प्रेरित करती है। इसके 9वें संस्करण में भाग लेने के लिए NIOS के मुक्त बेसिक शिक्षा स्तर का माध्यमिक व उच्चतर माध्यमिक स्तर के शिक्षार्थियों से निवेदन है कि आप सभी इस अभियान में पंजीकृत होकर जुड़े। शिक्षार्थी अपने स्वरचित पोस्टर व वीडियो इस ईमेल पर साझा कर सकते हैं। ऑनलाइन पंजीकरण की अंतिम तिथि 11 जनवरी 2026 है। NIOS के साथ पढ़ें और बढ़ें, आत्मविश्वास रखें और परीक्षाओं में तनाव मुक्त रहें।
Welcome to NIOS live classes. Subject Indian Sign Language Secondary number 317. Module number 1 Understanding Indian Sign Language. Lesson number 3 and the topic is Deaf Communities and Sign Language in other countries in comparison to ISL. Introduction. India has a large deaf population with significant differences between the lives and concerns of those living in cities and rural areas. Now in India, access to education through sign language, particularly in every years, is important but negligible. In India, NGOs have played a significant role in education, in educating, training, and establishing deaf identity through the using of sign language and deaf teachers in India. The status of sign language in India and education, employment and interpreting services in advanced countries such as USA, Norway, Denmark, they are more developed than in India. outcomes. After study this lesson, learner will discuss features of the deaf community in India and comparing it to other deaf communities in the world. They can compare some feature of ISL to those of other sign language. They can also demonstrate an awareness of diversity in sign languages and deaf communities around the world. We will know the features of the Indian deaf community. First, we will look at the deaf community in India, in cities and in villages. The population of deaf community in India is quite huge compared to deaf communities in other parts of the world. The deaf community in cities are more likely to be more involved in activities such as deaf schools, deaf association, festivals, religious gatherings and training events, etc. Hence, deaf people in cities are more connected to each other and have more gatherings and opportunity for communication in ISL. But deaf people in villages are not that well connected as there are fewer opportunities to interact with deaf peers. Their access to ISL is also limited. Now we will look at the access to Indian Sign Language. Only 5% of deaf students have access to education in India. Most teachers use the oral method to teach deaf students. Even at the home, most deaf children do not get the access to sign language as their parents are hearing and they use verbal language to communicate. It is important to give early sign language input to deaf children at the age of 0 to 5 years. But there are only a few early intervention services in India. In India, these intervention services happens in Haryana, Punjab and Kerala at NISH, which is National Institute of Speech and Hearing. parents mostly spend a deaf child's early years hoping that they will speak. They try to teach them verbal language and try that they will speak, but speech is not developed in many deaf children. Most parents are hearing and do not know sign languages themselves. As a result, most deaf children are not exposed to sign language until they attend deaf schools. We can say this might be at a late age or after the critical period. Now we will look at the role of NGOs, deaf clubs and deaf associations. Deaf students tend to join short-term training events at various NGOs which are in ISL. It can be 2 months or 3 months. They may also join deaf clubs and associations where there is full access to communication and discussion in ISL. Some people meet regularly when they travel, for example on a local trains in Mumbai or in metro in Delhi, etc. When deaf students participate in ISL based programs or activities and festivals, they get deeper exposure to ISL and improve their ISL skills. There are also many deaf-led NGOs and institutes that offer personal development and work placement programs. For example, it can include the Deaf Enable Foundation, or we can say DEF, and second is Noida Deaf Society, which is NDS. Hence, these NGOs play an important role in deaf communities. It helps them providing ISL communication and learning. Many deaf people feel that they have a deaf identity, often seen as deaf saying, as a sense of community. Deaf events, programs and festivals. Deaf people from various places get to interact at events, programs, and festivals. This has led to a strongly connected deaf community in India. For example, a program like Deaf Expo and sports event organized by AISCD, which is All India Sports Council of Deaf. There are dramatic performances, modeling, deaf lectures, art events, and stand-up comedy. The deaf participants enjoys those events and programs. Same as the deaf participant at sports and cultural events come from different parts of the country, but they all communicate in ISL, share their experiences, and enjoy their time together with using ISL and getting better in ISL through communication. Now let's take a short break.
परीक्षा पे चर्चा प्रतियोगिता 2000 शिक्षा मंत्रालय भारत सरकार का यह विविध सहभागिता कार्यक्रम एक अभियान के रूप में प्रधानमंत्री नरेंद्र मोदी जी के प्रयासों से सतत बढ़ रहा है। उद्देश्य है छात्रों, अभिभावकों, शिक्षकों और पूरे समाज को एक साथ लाना। प्रधानमंत्री जी की पुस्तक एग्जाम वॉरियर्स शिक्षार्थियों को सकारात्मकता व आत्मविश्वास के साथ परीक्षाओं में सम्मिलित होने की प्रेरणा देती है। NIOS इसी प्रेरणा को साकार करते हुए शिक्षार्थियों में चरित्र निर्माण और व्यक्तित्व के सर्वांगीण विकास के साथ साथ कौशल व उद्यमिता को केंद्र में रख आगे बढ़ रहा है। परीक्षा पे चर्चा PPC 2026 शिक्षार्थियों को खुशी से सीखने और तनाव मुक्त परीक्षाओं की तैयारी के लिए प्रेरित करती है। इसके 9वें संस्करण में भाग लेने के लिए NIOS के मुक्त बेसिक शिक्षा स्तर गा, माध्यमिक व उच्चतर माध्यमिक स्तर के शिक्षार्थियों से निवेदन है कि आप सभी इस अभियान में पंजीकृत होकर जुड़े। शिक्षार्थी अपने स्वरचित पोस्टर व वीडियो इस ईमेल पर साझा कर सकते हैं। ऑनलाइन पंजीकरण की अंतिम तिथि 11 जनवरी 2026 है। NIOS के साथ पढ़ें और बढ़ें, आत्मविश्वास रखें और परीक्षाओं में तनाव मुक्त रहें।
Welcome back to our live classes. Now we will look at the International Week of the Deaf and International Day of Sign Languages. Every year, The last week in the month of September is celebrated as the International Week of the Deaf and the International Day of Sign Language, which is held on 23rd September of every year. Deaf people of all ages participate in the festivals. The festivals include art and culture programs, lectures on sign language and deaf history, and awareness sessions. This is an important day in the life of deaf people. Now, apart from this, there are also interpreters who use Indian Sign Language. We call them ISL interpreters. India's deaf community is large, but there are not enough sign language interpreters to meet their needs. Limited interpreter availability creates difficulties in many things. For example, in accessing education, training, and at workplace, meetings, etc. For this, government initiatives like the ISLRTC and RPWT 2016 have improved the situation of information and communication accessibility for the deaf community in recent years. In India, for deaf to meet the demand for interpreters, many centers now offer a 2-year diploma. A 2-year diploma in Indian Sign Language interpreting, which we call DISLI course. And some higher education institute provide interpreters to deaf students. Many public events and functions now provide access to Indian Sign Language. The Act, Right of Person with Disability Act 2016 mention that the right of equal access, which is important for good education and the development of the deaf community. This Act, Right of Person with Disability Act 2016 was passed by both houses of Parliament of India after a series of consultation, meetings and drafting process. It has been approved. After receiving presidential assent, It was notified on December 28, 2016. According to RPWD Act of 2016, the appropriate government shall ensure that the PWD enjoys the right of equality, life with dignity, and respect for his or her own integrity or an equal footing with others. The RPWD Act of 2016 increased the number of disabilities from 7 to 21. Now we will look at the deaf community in India compared to others around the world. Bilingual, bicultural deaf education is progressing in the USA. Deaf students have full access to ISL to learn written English. And also parents receive information about ISL and speech options also. Parents decide what is best for their child. But in India, parents are not informed about sign languages as a viable option. And also access to bilingual education through ISL is mostly not available in India. They have in some places like Indore, Kerala, only some places. But in many parts of the world, deaf students are mainstreamed with hearing students. This means that the deaf students have to face some problems like depend on writing back and forth. Second, read lips in order to communicate. And also they use sign language interpreters or live captioning. But these are only available in developed setting where technology is developed. When there is more mainstreaming in deaf education, there is less interaction among the deaf people. Deaf communities in such places are smaller and scattered. In European countries such as Norway and the Netherlands, the deaf communities are quite small because of mainstreaming. Also in Denmark and Australia, there is more cochlear implantation and focus on speech. As a result, the deaf communities are shrinking. The deaf communities in these areas are worried about the future of their existence. And in India, in comparison, deaf communities are very large and active with a lot of interaction with each other. Now we will look at the international deaf events. There are international gatherings and festivals where deaf people from across the world came together. For example, Clendiol Festival. It happens in France, is an international deaf festival. Many deaf people came from various countries to enjoy several events such as lectures, art, jokes, modeling, dance, drama, and so on. The interactions among deaf people from different parts of the world build a sense of connectivity and community through deaf culture. Similarly to this, India also has the international deaf programs. For example, India International Deaf Film Festival. Such events build and reinforce the connections in the deaf. They connect deaf community through shared languages and their cultures. However, the international programs can be expensive, so the deaf people also tend to choose events based on their interest and aptitude. And in India, however, most deaf events are affordably priced, so most deaf people are easily able to participate. Hence, deaf community ties tend to be stronger. These events provide exposure to the services and success in other parts of the world. Many deaf people who go for such events and come back with a great motivation and ideas for better work for their future. Now we will learn the deaf community connections. Deaf business owners are part of a supportive and connected deaf ecosystem in the USA. They serve as role models for other deaf peoples, whether they can be in a job, place, workplace, school, etc. China also has a strong deaf community, but there are a slightly difference in China and India in terms of accessibility options. And also in the quality of education. Because the quality of education in China is way much greater than the India. And the last, it also in the terms of the number of deaf colleges, because China has many deaf colleges rather than India. Let's take a short break.
उद्देश्य है छात्रों, अभिभावकों, शिक्षकों और पूरे समाज को एक साथ लाना। प्रधानमंत्री जी की पुस्तक एग्जाम वॉरियर्स शिक्षार्थियों को सकारात्मकता व आत्मविश्वास के साथ परीक्षाओं में सम्मिलित होने की प्रेरणा देती है। NIOS इसी प्रेरणा को साकार करते हुए शिक्षार्थियों में चरित्र निर्माण और व्यक्तित्व के सर्वांगीण विकास के साथ साथ कौशल व उद्यमिता को केंद्र में रख आगे बढ़ रहा है। परीक्षा पे चर्चा PPC 2026 शिक्षार्थियों को खुशी से सीखने और तनाव मुक्त परीक्षाओं की तैयारी के लिए प्रेरित करती है। इसके 9वें संस्करण में भाग लेने के लिए NIOS के मुक्त बेसिक शिक्षा स्तर गा, माध्यमिक व उच्चतर माध्यमिक स्तर के शिक्षार्थियों से निवेदन है कि आप सभी इस अभियान में पंजीकृत होकर जुड़े। शिक्षार्थी अपने स्वरचित पोस्टर व वीडियो इस ईमेल पर साझा कर सकते हैं। ऑनलाइन पंजीकरण की अंतिम तिथि 11 जनवरी 2026 है। NIOS के साथ पढ़ें और बढ़ें, आत्मविश्वास रखें और परीक्षाओं में तनाव मुक्त रहें।
Welcome back to our live classes. Now we will look at the interpreting services across the world. In Europe, there are various national sign languages, so interpreters are required to get trained in many sign languages. There are interpreting agencies who provide these services when required by their deaf and hearing clients. Similarly, many countries in Asia and Africa have good interpreting services available for communication access. Now we will look at the sign language recognition. The place Uganda was the first country to have the sign language recognized by its government. Later, many other countries in Europe also recognized their sign languages. Brazil has excellent government policies related to sign languages. Many deaf professionals there get good job opportunity, and also there are many deaf teachers and academics. But in India, sign language is not officially recognized yet, although it is mentioned in some laws related to disability. Now we will look at the sign language across the world. ISL is completely different from the other sign languages. Some sign languages, such as sign language in Mexico and Japan, have unusual and complex signs which are not easy to understand for a non-native signer, or we can say non-native sign user. ISL has to be developed through the interaction of Indian deaf community. The finger spelling is influenced by British Sign Language, but most of these signs are not influenced by other sign languages. Like the vocabulary is unique to ISL. A few ISL expressions resemble hearing gestures, such as their sign of what. The expression of word is similar to the hearing person, and also the sign of no, it also resembles with the hearing gestures. The sign for hearing in ISL signifies hearing near the ear and has mouthing influence of normal, as most hearing people use this to identify themselves when meeting a deaf person. The sign of hearing in ASL is related to talking. That's the sign of talking in ASL. Some signs are similar between sign languages. For example, the sign of good in BSL is the same as that in ISL. But the sign of bad in BSL and in ISL are different. There are some similarities in signs from Japan and South Korea. For example, man and women. Or we can see the other examples also, the sign of marry, the sign of divorce. In ISL, the sign of divorce is resembled with the D, but in Japan and South Korea is very different. The sign of people the sign of sister, sign of sun, signs for quotients and negatives have different head movements in India and Turkey. In India, raised eyebrows and head back and chin up means what? But in Turkey, raised eyebrows and head back chin up means no. Now we will look at the what does the Indian deaf community need. The Indian deaf community needs quality bilingual education. They need better access to communication and information because it is written in the RPWD Act mandates equal access for all persons with disabilities. It needs a deaf university to create a pool of deaf professionals and more job opportunities for deaf people in Indian Sign Language work. Thank you.
परीक्षा पे चर्चा प्रतियोगिता 2026 में आपका स्वागत है। शिक्षा मंत्रालय भारत सरकार का यह विविध सहभागिता कार्यक्रम एक अभियान के रूप में प्रधानमंत्री नरेंद्र मोदी जी के प्रयासों से सतत बढ़ रहा है। उद्देश्य है छात्रों, अभिभावकों, शिक्षकों और पूरे समाज को एक साथ लाना। प्रधानमंत्री जी की पुस्तक एग्जाम वॉरियर्स शिक्षार्थियों को सकारात्मकता व आत्मविश्वास के साथ परीक्षाओं में सम्मिलित होने की प्रेरणा देती है। NIOS इसी प्रेरणा को साकार करते हुए शिक्षार्थियों में चरित्र निर्माण और व्यक्तित्व के सर्वांगीण विकास के साथ साथ कौशल व उद्यमिता को केंद्र में रख आगे बढ़ रहा है। परीक्षा पे चर्चा PPC 2026 शिक्षार्थियों को खुशी से सीखने और तनाव मुक्त परीक्षाओं की तैयारी के लिए प्रेरित करती है। इसके 9वें संस्करण में भाग लेने के लिए NIOS के मुक्त बेसिक शिक्षा स्तर ग, माध्यमिक व उच्चतर माध्यमिक स्तर के शिक्षार्थियों से निवेदन है कि आप सभी इस अभियान में पंजीकृत होकर जुड़े। शिक्षार्थी अपने स्वरचित पोस्टर व वीडियो इस ईमेल पर साझा कर सकते हैं। ऑनलाइन पंजीकरण की अंतिम तिथि 11 जनवरी 2026 है। NIOS के साथ पढ़ें और बढ़ें, आत्मविश्वास रखें और परीक्षाओं में तनाव मुक्त रहें।